Well, hello and welcome to the Smells Like Money podcast. Join me, Suzan Taylor, the DooDoo Diva, as I interview guests who are making an impact on how we manage and operate systems for conveying and treating wastewater. As a veteran of the wastewater, trenchless, and civil infrastructure industry, each week I'll be bringing you industry know-how from industry pros who know how. Join me each week as I speak with representatives of organizations that are utilizing disruptive or new technologies and methods, and executives who are excited to share how to be successful and sustainable in our vital industry. So whether you want to learn about the latest trends in technology, in treatment or trenchless, gain tips on training and retaining great talent, or simply how to be more efficient, productive, or profitable, this podcast is for you. Ready? Let's dive right in. Well, hello, and I am Suzan Chin, the DooDoo Diva from the Smells Like Money podcast, joined here by
Nick Spano of Essential Equipment.
And this week's episode is brought to you live from a very special venue here at the WWETT Show 2023 in Indianapolis.
And a special thanks to our sponsor, RapidView, who's graciously donated a part of their booth so we could record these interviews and podcasts over the course of the couple of days of the show.
So thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this special episode. Well, hey, Jim, and welcome to the show. For those of you who are tuning in, we have the privilege of visiting with a very old friend of mine, an industry colleague, Jim Aanderud, the former president and owner of Interline Engineering, a contracting business. And Jim now is the president of Promethean Technologies and is a member of the consulting group for the Tuit Group. He is the author of the Profitability Playbook. And today we're going to be talking about Jim's brand new course entitled The Gain, Train, and Retain Playbook. And it is a how-to guide on how to find, groom, and retain and empower a great labor workforce for your company. And so welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So, Jim, tell me a little bit about what kind of, I know what prompted you to do the profitability playbook, and that you saw that contractors simply just didn't know how to read their numbers and, how to make their nut, So what prompted wanting to write this, I guess you would call it, workforce development course?
I've had the privilege of speaking on many occasions and at the WET show actually for, I think, the last 25 years or so. And inevitably, there's always somebody that comes up and asks me, how do you find good employees? It is not easy.
It is the $1 million question.
It really is, and it's something that just doesn't happen automatically. Sometimes we get lucky. I've had employees that I just really lucked out, stayed with me for 15 years, but those were good people. I think I did some things right, but I did a lot of things wrong. And I think oftentimes when we look at contractors, we're all just kind of floundering out there trying to figure out how to do certain things. Let's face it, that most contractors aren't people that went and studied business school. And so they don't have, this base background learned from college. Usually they've come up through the ranks. They've actually performed the work in the field, and they just kind of learn on the fly. And so they've learned the actual process of doing whatever skill the company performs. But a lot of the business aspect of it is something that they kind of learn sometimes by default, sometimes by mistakes, which I can say I've learned a lot. What do they say? If you learn from your own mistakes, you're smart. If you learn from someone else's mistakes, you're wise. And I think I was smart most of the time, but hope to be more wise as I move forward.
Further to your point, as someone who did go to college and even got a relatively applicable degree, which I got a degree in construction management, there's really no focus on the management part. Like, other than you have to take finance, you have to learn how to do math. But there's no focus on HR related things, on entrepreneurial things. Like, there's none of that in I guess most college curriculums. So certainly nothing about hiring and training and how important it is. I think all of us kind of had to learn that the hard way.
We all do.
Yeah.
And there's so much to learn. I mean, there's the finances and there's everything else that people really struggle with. And so the hiring part of it, I think, came about because I realized that so many people struggle with it. And, a hire has so much impact. First of all, financially, because when you hire somebody, the investment that you make into them, the investment of bringing them on, spending the time training them, and then finding out, a few weeks or a few months later that it's not a keeper, it's impactful because not only is it impacting the investment you made in that person, but you hired this person because you had a need. You had a need to fill a certain performance out in the field. And all of a sudden, I need to cut this guy loose. But if I do, I don't have all the people that I need. And so it's a real challenge. And so oftentimes what I find is that contractors will just say, hey, I need somebody. Oh, I know a guy, I'll just, he's looking for a job. Okay, come bring him out. Let's check him out. And they bring out, and then you find out a few weeks later, the guy just got out of prison, or, or he was just a real toxic individual at his last job. And you didn't do your due diligence to make sure that this guy was worthy. And so I think a lot of mistakes are just made. How many people hire their cousin, and they keep him on, and the guy's a complete lug. And you keep him on because he's a relative, but yet he's creating a toxic environment because what you're doing is you're allowing somebody to perform at a less capacity, and the other employees are seeing that. They go, hey, how come he treats him differently than he does me? And so I think that the most important part about finding individuals is doing your due diligence. And that is making sure that you are advertising in the right places, that you are going to the pool of people that you want to draw into your company, having a good idea of what kind of people you want. What are the skills? Again, these are people oftentimes that kind of floundered from job to job. They really haven't figured out what they want to do with their lives. Sometimes you find people, and it's not different. There's different ages. It could be 28 years old. It could be younger where they met a girl. They want to get married. They want to buy a house. And all of a sudden they're going, you know what? I want a career. And sometimes when you can tap these people at the right time and bring them on, they can really turn out to be just great employees. But again, we have to go through the process, to know what we want to hire, because we need to be able to spot it if it's not good. It's like when you had a toxic girlfriend, and next time you see somebody like that, you go like, oh man, I don't have to go through the whole process. I know exactly what this person is like. Okay. Well, it's the same thing with employees, is that you have certain employees that come on, certain things that you can spot, but you have to go full-fledged into the interview process. You have to do your due diligence, and you have to have other people involved in the process alone. You alone sometimes can let things go.
You can put blinders on or let your needs override your, logical brain of, oh, I see that there's a red flag here, but I really need someone.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And oftentimes we do put blinders on because we're more focused on the need. I got to get this contract done. I don't have enough people. And so, that's an area that could be a problem. Oftentimes too, just having people that, especially like, I was in the CCTV inspection business. And so we always had to have an operator operating the camera equipment, inspecting the pipeline. And then we had to have someone in the back of the truck. Well, that was a really great opportunity to take someone that was capable, to put them in the back of the truck, prepare them where they're taking it in and they're not rushed into the job, to where if you do have a need, you can always, that person's ready to step up. So that's kind of looking forward. But most of the time, finding someone who can fit into your company is a challenge. And I tell you, the consequences can be devastating. You bring people from other companies, all of a sudden they're telling others, well, this is how we used to do it, and they're not doing it right, and the owner's this, and they just get in somebody's head. And suddenly this great employee that you've had for a long time, all of a sudden has an attitude, he's doing poor work, and you confront him, he's like, well, you guys are doing this, you do that. Now, what in the world, where did that come from? And so, we just need to make sure that we know what's in there, because it can really mess up our company, and it can also make our company flourish. And we're represented by the people who work for us. As an owner, people knew me, but I was kind of in the background. I didn't spend the day in, day out there with the customer. And so that employee that you're hiring is the one that is your face of the company. They're the ones that are going to be respected. They're the ones that are going to really build your company. And so having those individuals, and you make somebody succeed by giving them the tools. I mean, the last thing you want to do is to bring a great employee on and just kind of halfway train them. And you put them out in the field and this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's not getting it. Well, it's not his fault. This is a great individual with high capacity, but yet he hasn't been given the tools. And oftentimes what we tend to do is we tend to either rush through the training because we think that we don't want to spend the money. We have them go out and work in the field with an individual that's been doing it for a while. Oh, just go out and teach him, just watch him. Well, is this guy really a good trainer? Right. You know, does he have bad habits? You know, is he passing these things on to the individual?
Right. And it sounds like what you're talking about goes right back to what we spoke about in the last interview we did this morning with Joe Schottefer. And that's about us as owners, as managers, as whatever your position is, supervisor. That's different than being a leader. And we have to be leaders of our employees to train them, to give them the resources they need. It's more about, I think we have to look at ourselves. In addition to interviewing the individuals, I think we have to constantly make improvements on the leadership side of things.
There's no doubt.
In order to be better ourselves.
You know, and again, these things, oftentimes, like I said, contractors tend to come up through the ranks. And a lot of these things are foreign to them. You know, some of us are natural leaders, some of us aren't. Some of us have, great skills, but we all have weaknesses. And so I think the important thing is to really kind of identify and understand ourselves, be humble, to say, you know what, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at holding people accountable. I'm not good at training. I'm not good, or whatever the case might be, is to be able to admit that and say, okay, so let's get somebody who can perform this properly. And there's so many things to business, and I think leadership is a great part. Yeah. You are a leader, but it also can be learned. There, absolutely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's necessarily natural or innate. Just how much do you want to practice at it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that was something that you touch on in the course, is that the value of going beyond just the technical training of your team is to also invest in doing some leadership training to make sure, like, let's say sometimes we might promote someone because of loyalty. Oh, they've been with me 10 years. They're a hard worker. But is he the right person? Because maybe this is someone that they love working with their hands. They love doing the field work. They don't want to manage people. They just want to be given their task, go off and do their thing. And now all of a sudden you think you're doing them a favor. You give them a promotion and they absolutely hate having to look out for 3 other people. And what happens? 6 months later, they get frustrated and they quit.
Yeah.
Well,
and you just, you've invested time and you've lost a really, really good person.
We do not want to set people up to fail.
Yes.
And it's really important that we have an understanding of personalities and what people's desires are. This is all part of the training. Training isn't just when they come in. This is not incoming training. It's an ongoing thing. It encompasses so much. I mean, you can't take for granted that someone knows anything, even driving, for example. The guy drives, he'll get in the truck and drive. I mean, we can't even take that for granted because, like in my case, we had these inspection vans, and these guys would not even pay attention to the tall part, and they'd wind up running into overhangs.
You replaced air conditioners on top.
Yeah, exactly. Or the covers. Absolutely. And so we just can't take for granted that someone knows something. Okay, knows how to drive. No, let's talk about driving. Let's talk about what the precautions are, what the company policies are. Speed limits, all that kind of. How do you react to different things, circumstances, an accident, to whatever the case might be? How do you report that? Going through every single aspect of everything we do, I think is very, very important. And then as we go forward and we have refresher training, then we start to introduce, leadership and areas where we see these people that can develop. Now, I got to say one thing. I hadn't thought about this till now. Sometimes you get a guy that's real, man, he's just sharp as can be, right? And he's just natural leader. You want to give him all the leadership role, have him, run the crews and everything. But he has ambitions to start his own company.
Yeah.
So that has something too. So there's kind of a balance there, right? But I think that not only the part of giving people the tools to be able to succeed, but keeping these people, and how do you do that? It's not easy because again, there's guys they have higher ambition, and so you have egos, you have misunderstandings. These guys want to make more money. And so to really kind of create a culture within the company that people identify with, number one, they need to respect you. They need to be treated respectfully. Someone said one time, you want to be as a boss, you want to be firm but fair. And if you're a linguini spine, you're not going to be respected. If you're too difficult on them and you're just toxic to the employees and you're yelling at them all the time, they're not going to want to stick around. And so, but there's also a balance. You can be friends with them, but there is a line. And to really kind of understand what that line is and not cross it, but maintain that respectful relationship with these people. And I think it comes down, I think Suzan, one of the things that she has done is the DISC course. And the reason I bring that up is because the more we are able to understand the personalities of the people we hire, the better. Even in hiring, we need to be able to understand the personalities we're looking at, because if we bring a guy that's just brash and a bulldozer, he's going to upset everybody else. On the other hand, we bring somebody in that's just not really fitting. We need to understand those things.
Yes. You can't use profiles for hiring or hiring decisions because it's illegal. But it is a kind of a neat tool if you've got an intact team when someone comes in, that every once in a while to have a workplace, have everybody do a profile and have a facilitation for everybody to get to know each other. And it can be such an eye opener. When I do these classes, I call them the aha moments, where they're just rubbing the person the wrong way, or they're just not getting along on a crew and they don't understand why they're having the difficulties. And they get through and then they learn what their profile is. And all of a sudden the light goes on and says, oh, they need to communicate this way. They're not doing it to annoy me. It's just the way that they need to express themselves. And then that other person on the other side says, oh, he's a person that just is just the facts. And so I need to maybe curb my enthusiasm a little bit. And maybe I can do that kind of thing with somebody else that can accept that kind of, energy from me. But this person, I need to tone it down a little bit. And as we begin to understand ourselves and what makes us tick, our stressors, our motivators, and the way we show up in the world, then we're better able to communicate with others. And I think that's all part of that, workplace culture, because we were saying this, that the biggest drain on a company's bottom line is human insecurity. And everybody has it. We came into this world with it. It's just part of our human condition. And so as business owners, and we're all business owners here, if we understand that, then we can create an environment where people feel secure and feel safe and can communicate and build a better team. And you touch a lot on that in just that team building and keeping open communication. I remember one time you said, when you were struggling sometimes, when the receivables were getting tight, that you wish that you had just sat down with your management team and kind of really let them know the stress that you were under as a business owner and why maybe you were feeling tense. And that, because even they said, oh, Jim, you should have let us know, because maybe we could have helped you.
Well, I think that we think that we're hiding things from our team, and we're not. I mean, they see the fact that you're stressed. They see the fact that one of your vendors has put you on cash only. And so if you're not communicating with them and you're not telling them, hey guys, we're just going through this period, everything's going to be fine, they're going to each other, go, man, we're going out of business. We're going to lose our job. We need to start looking for a new job. And so that communication obviously is a big part of being an owner, being a manager of any type. Right. But going back to the hiring part, I think, this may sound maybe a bit naive, but in my hiring, that having that compatibility within your organization, it was kind of like, hey, if I like the guy, chances are the people I've hired before me that work for me are going to like them as well. And so sometimes, sure, you can go through the whole aspect, and it's important to look at the different aspects of a personality. But oftentimes, we have friends because we like them, we get along with them. And so it's an individual. You say, this guy's sharp, but I like him. He's got the personality. And I think everybody in the organization will like him. Conversely, if you wind up finding a guy, he really has a high aptitude, he really, but he's just, really brutal. Sometimes you got to pass on that stuff. And oftentimes I think we get blinded by the fact that, hey, this guy, he's already has experience. He's someone I can bring in. He can fit in right away and start working right away because he's already been working. Well, that's not always a great idea, because
Right.
oftentimes you're bringing somebody from another organization that has a whole different way of doing it. He's telling the other employees, oh, that's not the way we did it over there, and that's not the right way. And I personally, I like to grow my employees from scratch.
Yeah,
I like
I'm
a
in
clean
agreement.
slate. Do you agree with that?
Yes, because I'm in both the CCTV cleaning industry and in the equipment sales industry. I found just that. I don't want your bad habits from your other employers. Experience is great, but if we take an active role to train people, we can train them up in the image and in the culture of our company,
Totally agree.
which is, I think, a long term play, right? Short term discomfort or hopefully long term value, to go about it that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And oftentimes too, we need to just kind of take our times with individuals. I think sometimes contractors trying to rush them through. For example, when I used to hire people to be a CCTV inspection operator, I hired guys who had IT background, who were computer literate, but had no idea about the industry itself. And so I could have taken them and I could have put them in the chair and say, this is how you inspect pipe. And they're focused. Once you're inspecting pipe, you're focused. I mean, there's nothing else going on around if you're doing it right. And so they would miss out on everything going on, how to set up traffic control, the whole environment outside of the van. And so giving them time to absorb the industry, understand the environment before you actually put them in the chair and start giving them that skill.
And well, and just to be contrary, but then the problem is, can this maybe more computer savvy applicant, can he make it through that first year or 18 months of lowering the camera and setting up cones and working the stop slow paddle? Because a lot of times those positions are just different, right? Like the guy that wants to be running the robot, is maybe his desire is not to be chopping a path through the easement to go find the manhole.
You're absolutely right.
I want him to understand all that, but it's a real balance, right? To show him that and teach him that, or her, without running them off.
Right. Well, that environment is also the operators having to do that as well. That's part of it, and it takes me back to the hiring. You have an individual who has this capability, has computer background in this case, and so you need to be very clear in your ads that you are self eliminating yourself when you say, "Hey, we're working in a sewer environment." So, instead of like hiring somebody and then they come in and they're like, "Oh man, I don't want to work around sewers." You know what I mean? And so
you didn't tell me there was sewage.
Yeah, and so I think those things are very important beforehand, to just have people self eliminate.
Yeah.
And one time I actually I was I'm in the California area, Southern California, and I put an ad out for a camera operator early in my years, and I got tons of calls from all these camera operators for Hollywood.
Oh,
and I didn't word it correctly, and so these guys were all looking, hey, what kind of movie can I get on? And so I kind of learned the same thing with a combination unit. I looked for a Class A driver. Well, I got all these people calling in, going, I don't have to get out of the truck, do I? No. And so oftentimes the way we actually word ads to make sure that we're not sitting there just taking all these dumb ads, people that are just calling in because they don't understand, explain it well so that we're actually getting qualified and people that look at that as a possible career.
Yeah.
All great points. And it's kind of cool, before we came on the show, that I did not know that, well, I knew you had been a contractor in CCTV like Jim, but I didn't know that you had the HR background too. So I'm sure that you've gone through.
I mean, self-taught. I mean, I developed a process, but a bit, again, you got to stick to the process. Put out the ad, read the email, make the phone screening, and you may whittle 100 applicants down to 10 actual interviews, of only which 5 will show up. And it's hiring is hard.
Right.
You have to have a huge pool of applicants to come up with one good hire.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And the more people you have involved in the process, I think is better because you're getting other perspectives as well. You may say, hey, this guy's good. Somebody else might look at it and go, did you think about this? Maybe not. And women's intuition sometimes is a great thing. You may think, well, I have a receptionist uh, or, somebody that works on the books, but getting their input, it's this whole different perspective and I think can be very valuable.
oh, especially if someone doesn't feel like they're being interviewed. Um, I 100% of the time will ask uh, Anne, who works at our front desk, oh, did you talk to so and so when they came in? Oh yeah, he was very nice, and and because the applicant will tell Anne things that because it's not an interview, they're just making small
Right,
talk, or
right.
they'll sometimes reveal their motivation for wanting the job, which is a big for me. That's a big either plus or minus. Why is it you are here? And they won't. Sometimes people are scared to tell you that directly in the interview, but they'll tell somebody else. So yeah, definitely getting a second perspective, I think, is huge. And calling references, which is a huge pain in the butt. And for me, it's not even just calling the references that they have given you. Sometimes you have to probe for more because, well, I see you've given me your cousin and 3 employers ago. Could maybe someone, at your last job speak to your skills and your abilities and why you're not there? And you can learn a lot from that. Well, what was the circumstances in which they left their last job? Was it an amicable separation, or was there some nonsense going on? I think you just have to keep asking questions, and like you said earlier, Jim, it's a long process.
It's not overnight.
Yeah, it is not.
But that's a really good point, because they're going to give you the most glowing people that are, oh, he's wonderful, she's wonderful, whatever. So I think sometimes during the process, can you give me just a couple more people that I could talk to, kind of put them on the spot, and let's talk about resumes, do people lie on resumes? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so if you're using that as your primary screening process, chances are that you're going to be very disappointed when it comes down to it. Because people will tell you, yes, I have experience. I did that obviously with CCTV because of the computers. People, oh yeah, I'm a computer literate. Well, in their mind they are, but in their last job they performed one software. They had one software they would do maybe data entry into. They didn't understand how to manipulate data, to copy files, and all the stuff that you need to do.
Don't know how to work a spreadsheet.
And so sometimes, every time I would have them sit down and show me. Sit down. Okay, show me on a computer that because they're going to tell you they do. Same thing, welder. You can't just take somebody for granted that they know how to weld. Hey, show me how you weld.
Right.
And so I think that needs to be a very, very important part that we actually know what kind of skill we are getting. And it also tells us how far we need to go in our training and how do we need to customize it.
Right. I mean, we take a lot of things for granted. Even some of it's generational, I think. Some of it's just let's see, how do I say this? If you grew up on a farm, you likely are already handy, already understand basic mechanics, can drive well, can back a trailer up. I can't tell you how many people I hired that had never had to back up a trailer, which is something I take for granted because I know how to do it. It's a great employee. And some of them, fortunately, would speak up. They're like, I actually don't feel comfortable doing that. Why not? Well, I've never have. So what we would do is we'd set up cones in the parking lot and make the guys back in a very low pressure situation, low stakes situation, back a trailer up. Okay, let's make sure you can do this. You can't really advance and move on until I'm sure you have this very basic skill. And, give them a couple of times, they got it. But it's something that generally I would take for granted. Like, well, everybody knows how to back a trailer up. Not true.
And that's why I think it's very important to have a training plan. You just can't wing it and expect to remember everything that you need to cover. I think it's very important, not only yourself, but also somebody that works with you, the people in the field, is to sit down and put together a very comprehensive training plan where you are listing every single skill, everything that needs to be covered so that nothing is missed. It's also important that you have documentation. I had a friend of mine who had an accident. He had an individual who was actually killed out in the field. He was driving. He was out in the field. He didn't engage the combination unit. The combination unit started rolling. He ran after it, jumped on it.
Oh man.
Anyway, bad news. So of course OSHA just descended on him, and he needed to have all this documentation to show that this guy had been trained properly, and he did have that. So very, very important, because that can show up in litigation. It can show up in OSHA investigations. You need to show and have a paper trail that shows everything that you've trained.
Sure.
Also, as far as there's certain agencies that when you bid for them, they're asking you for your training logs. And so you need to show that you're having your regular tailgate meetings, that you're covering safety. I think from my perspective, training outside of the initial training, the ongoing training, is to have at least a semi tailgate meeting every day, certainly once a week. Try to have maybe a whole morning of training at least every 3 months, where you're bringing the guys in for safety training, and then have every 6 months a full day. Just take the guys off and just come in and provide the ongoing training. Because, if you're going to continue to thrive as a company, you need to be able to continue to perform that skill. I forgive me for referring to CCTV. Because we did cleaning
That's okay.
too.
I like CCTV.
Okay. I used to bring the guys in every 6 months, and we would play their videos to where we would self-critique them. They'd go, yeah, hey, that was a good inspection. The way you looked at the ladder, the way you panned over, that was really good. That didn't work. You didn't even stay long enough. And so they're really kind of critiquing each other, and they're kind of pointing out things that each of them could improve on. And what that did was it brought a higher standard to the employees, but it also provided continuity in the product that we produced.
Yeah, I like that. I would do something similar. I think I like the group idea better. I would, like, one-on-one, get the opportunity, come into my office for a second and just make them, I wouldn't hang around because I wanted them to feel like I was coming down on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, sit here and watch this video you did last week. Just so they could see. And a lot of times, like, they would have a lot of aha moments, having to go back and watch their own work. Because in their mind, a lot of times, they hit record, end the inspection, never think about it again. But when they have to go back and see what they did, a lot of times they realize how they could be better. And you didn't have to scold them. You didn't have to come down on them. Because most people, I think, want to naturally do a good job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then they want to know that they are doing a good job and they're appreciated for it. That's part of the retention. But I think the ongoing training is a really important part of a company that we just can't take for granted, that someone's been out there for 5 years doing the work, and that it continues to be at the standard that you want. People find areas to cut corners in.
Sure.
Hey, this is easier to do it this way, but maybe there's consequences for it. And so not only having that accountability, I'm big on accountability. That's huge in any company as an owner. You need to put accountability in place, but to be able to go out and observe, see bad habits. For example, again, CCTV, these guys are operating these very, very expensive cameras. I'd come out, these guys would pull them out of the manhole and kind of just drop it on the sidewalk. And I'm like, dude, you know how much this thing costs? That's more than your car. And so sometimes just that reminder. But bad habits set in. They cut corners. Hey, you know what? I've been doing this for a while, and nobody has said anything.
Right.
Therefore, it's okay. And then you come like, dude, what happened? Where did that come from? Well, nobody ever checked on it. And so I just think that training is a big part to make sure that people are being held accountable, that they continue to perform at the high standards that we want.
Yeah. And, and that's ties right into our job as managers and leaders, is to communicate back with the employee why you are asking them to do it that certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I understand you could take the shortcut, but this is the reason why we're not doing it. And a lot of times we just fall back to, well, just do what I say, or, it's because I said so, or something similar to that. But I think if you explain why, that's what people want to know. Why
Absolutely. And in our industry, in the CCTV, it's very expensive. It can cost you a lot of money if guys aren't performing the maintenance correctly. Any type of, any type of water ingress. I mean, we're talking about a huge amount of money if it's not being done correctly.
Right.
And so the consequences are if you can't justify the cost to have regular ongoing training, just look at your bills and how many times that the repair facility says, it's operator error.
Yeah. You hit the camera with the nozzle.
Well, I loved what you said, Nick, because I remember years ago, I guess it was my first job, and there was this report that had to be done, and I think it was called the dailies. And I was working in hospitality management, and everybody had to take a turn doing this because it was a really, really tedious document to produce. And finally, the catering manager who needed this for the dailies said, I think what you were saying, the why. The minute she explained to the people, because we all took turns doing this, why this document needed to be produced and how important it was, and how each department within the hotel used this in order to function and make sure that everything ran smoothly, from the kitchens to the restaurants to the banquet managers and everything. All of a sudden that light bulb went on, and all of a sudden it was like that document didn't feel as tedious to produce. It was still tedious work, but you didn't dread it and you didn't feel put out because you had to do it every week. You didn't grumble over it because you knew how important it was to make everybody else's job that you worked with every day so much easier. And so that was a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think, when people understand why they have to do something and it is like a tedious job, they're not going to bristle against it so much.
Right.
Because, hey, what I'm asking you to do may just save your coworker's life. And in our industry, it very well could. And so, Jim, I really want to thank you for coming on the episode and, just sharing your wisdom. And for those of you who, are struggling with hiring and training and retaining, don't be afraid to raise your hand and get help. And this is exactly why this course was produced, that it's a self-guided thing. You can take it at your own pace, and it's just chock full of information, not just, what we covered today, but a whole lot more that you can refer to over and over and over again to develop that dream team. You don't really have to struggle through this process. This has been developed by a contractor for contractors. Because, that was one thing that kind of intrigued me when you said you wanted to do this, is that there's lots of hiring courses, there's lots of HR courses, but they all seem to be very generic for businesses like retail or restaurants or office or, an insurance business or but I haven't seen anything that is for skilled trades and contracting in our industry. So, thank you for being willing to share your knowledge and, like you were saying, your mistakes, so people can learn from them, so that we can all benefit in our industry. So thank you.
We all become very humble as business owners, for sure.
Absolutely.
And so the information about this will be included in the show notes in this episode below. And again, the name of it is the Gain, Train, and Retain Playbook by Jim Aanderud. So thank you for listening.
Yep. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me, the DooDoo Diva, on this week's episode of Smells Like Money. What stood out to you this week? Share your takeaways by leaving me a review. You can find out more about the new technologies, creating sustainable solutions, and insights on how to succeed in our vital industry by subscribing to the show. Whether you want to learn about the latest trends in wastewater infrastructure, treatment, or trenchless, you've got it all right here at Smells Like Money. If you're an industry expert and would like to be considered as a guest for the show, book a quick chat with me by visiting calendly.com/the2it group/B-A-podcast-guest, or simply click the link in the show notes below. Until next week, a big shout out to all my industry friends and those who will be. You are my superheroes. Thanks for tuning in, keeping it flowing, and we'll see you all next week.